Wait till you meet our next guest. She's in our virtual green room here on America Tonight with me, Kate Delaney, in Author's Corner. Boy, oh boy, her story is fascinating. I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever you label yourself as. Her book is called Life on a Road Less Traveled, or Memoirs from Behind the Scenes of History. Loudell Insley joins us, and she worked for Ted Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. Think about Robert Kennedy when he was running for president and what it would be like to be on the road during that presidential campaign. And sadly, his tragic ending. And boy, the stories with Ted Kennedy, too. I mean, she really was there for a slice of history. Loudell, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
So I know why you wrote the book. You have to tell these stories. How did you get on this road less traveled? How did you get that first job with Ted Kennedy?
Oh, well, I was working at the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association in Washington, and I didn't like it. And so I was looking around for another job, and I called the employment agency in the Senate, and they said, and I went in for an interview, and they said there's nobody. Called me back that I want to work for a senator. They said there's no senator looking for anybody. So I called them back the following week, and she says, yes, there is one senator, Senator Ted Kennedy, and he's looking for a Catherine Gibbs secretarial school graduate and who is a constituent. You're not a constituent, but go try it. And I said, sure, I will. That would be practice. And because my family are Republicans, and I didn't expect to get anything. And so I went at at noon, my lunch hour, on the appointed day, and the executive assistant interviewed me. He says, well, come back tonight at 6:00. And I said, okay. And so I thought he was going to interview me again. But we went into the office, and there at the far end of that long office was this man and woman talking. And I waited. We waited and made small talk, and then finally he walked toward me, using a cane and limping a little bit. And I realized it was Senator Kennedy. I thought, "Oh my Lord, he's going to interview me." So anyway, that turned out to be the worst interview of my life. But anyway, it was a pleasure, and I didn't expect to get the job. And as we were walking out, he says to me casually, "You're living in Georgetown." And I said, "Yes, but I am moving in a couple of weeks to Glover Park, and my new roommate lives across the street from you." And he skidded to a stop and turned and looked at me with a icy stare. He says, "Oh, those girls, they crashed my party." That was the nail in the coffin.
So you end up getting the job. You work for Ted Kennedy, and then I'm going to jump ahead and we'll go back to Ted Kennedy. But
sure.
He lent you out to his brother because he was in the middle of a presidential campaign. What was that like, traveling and being a part of that piece of history that sadly ended in tragedy?
Well, I was substituting for Angie Novella, who was the senator's personal secretary, and she'd had a death in the family. So they said, go fill in for her for a week, and it turned out to be for the rest of the campaign. But it was very exciting and different. We had with us on the plane about 9 members of the staff, including Rosie Greer, who is a linebacker for the Rams, I think, and some other athletes who were his bodyguards. And then there was 9-10 people on the staff that were traveled with him. And then the rest of the people were, as you would probably imagine, were reporters who paid their way on our plane. And when we would sit there, when we girls would sit there and type on our laps the speeches and everything. In those days, it was manual typewriters, and we would type a copy, a large font for the senator to read from, and then we would type a stencil for mimeographing for the press to have a copy of the speech, and then we would crank out the mimeograph speech on the portable mimeograph that we had at our elbow. And in the evenings, we would go in, and the senator didn't like people to think of him as being so wealthy that he would have a valet go with him. So we were the valet, and we would go in and lay his clothes out for the next day and fix the room up for him, and then leave, because we didn't want to be in there when he finally got home. And then the speechwriters would probably meet with him maybe at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, go over the speech, and then our night began at midnight, and we would start working on the next speech for the next day. So our life was very full, and we would probably get to bed about 2 in the morning, and suitcases needed to be in the hallway at 6, so we weren't getting a lot of sleep.
Wow, and listen, I just can visualize you typing it. I hope people listening are really appreciating the front row seat you had to history. And then sadly, tragically, he's assassinated in California. What was that plane ride like, and what was the mood like? It had to be terrible. Well,
let me tell you one other little thing I was thinking of this morning that might be of interest to your listeners. When the senator had been shot, and now I was on the phone to the ballroom with Pierre Salinger, telling him what was happening. And when I hung up, Dick Goodwin, speechwriter, leaned over and said, "What about the children?" We had all of his younger children there traveling with us. They were staying in a different hotel. And so I called over to speak to them, to the babysitter who was traveling with them. And I said, "Are the children okay?" And he says, "Oh, yes, they're all in bed and asleep except for one. David is sitting here watching all of this." And I said, "Well, you can't get him to go to bed now, so just stick with him." That afternoon, he had been at the senator and his family had been relaxing at I think it was Joe Mankiewicz's house on the river, on the ocean, and with all the chaos of all those little children running around and everything, the senator saw his son David go out into the ocean and start swimming too far out, and he went and dove into the ocean and went out, and just as David was turning around to look for help, his father was there to grab him and help him back to shore.
Wow.
And so that was just the most poignant thing above the shooting that I could think of.
Wow.
And, it wasn't heavily discussed or anything.
Yeah.
And then in 1980, I was in Florida, and there was a small article in the paper that he had died in a hotel room alone with an overdose of drugs. And I've always thought that was another victim of Sirhan Sirhan.
Yeah, because of dealing with the tragedy of his father. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you have so many tales, and that's why you've written this book, and that's why I suggest that people go to Amazon and get Life on a Road Less Traveled, or memoirs from behind the scenes of history. What do you hope people take away from reading your story?
One of the things that really impressed me so much was how ordinary they were. They were just like everybody else. They had their worries, they had their concerns. We would sometimes be waiting outside of the senator's office in the evening, and he'd have the door closed on the phone with one of his children, telling him a bedtime story, or he'd be talking to the school dean about Joe Kennedy Jr.'s grades. He'd go out at trick-or-treating. I said, "How can he go trick-or-treating?" And they said, "Oh, no, they won't know. He's wearing a disguise." I said, "What's that?" He says, "He's going as a ghost." So he took his children trick-or-treating. He was just a very personable and family person, very, very family-oriented.
Yeah. Wow. And again, you talk about so many of those things in the book. Loudell, thank you.
Yes.
Loudell Insley for joining us on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Visit www.greatwritersmedia.com. Email us at info@greatwritersmedia.com. Call us at 877-600-5469. Subscribe now.